ARID Corporation, a Georgia corporation. Most low-slope roof systems contain open-cell insulation board installed just under the roof itself. This material, necessary to create a proper substrate for the roof membrane, has a dark side. Not unlike a sponge, it readily absorbs water. If water is introduced into this open-cell material through a slow leak, it is often absorbed through capillary action as quickly as it enters, masking the problem and allowing it to grow out of control. Roof systems installed over concrete decks or existing roof systems are particularly prone to this problem, allowing the buildup of substantial water-saturated insulation with no outward sign to alert the facility's manager. Causes for these slow and visible leaks vary, but are often the result of very minor physical damage or a slightly flawed application. Because the assembly is relatively compact, it prevents airflow, so once the insulation is wet, it seldom dries, even if the source of the infiltration is repaired. The age of the roof has less bearing than one might assume, and newer roofs suffer this malady just like older ones, and if they suffer it enough, don't survive long enough to become old. The most efficient means of early detection of wet insulation is thermal imaging technology, which can be utilized to pinpoint the problems while they are still small. Naturally, the sooner the wet insulation is discovered, the smaller the corrective action and associated cost will be. The following video will help explain how ARID Corporation utilizes infrared thermography to locate these problems. When the insulation inside the roof assembly becomes wet, several things happen. First, adhesion between the roof and the substrate is immediately compromised. This adhesion is critical to prevent wind damage and lateral transfer of thermal-induced expansion and contraction loads, placing a strain on the roof it was not intended to withstand, and shortening its life cycle. Note how the layers in a properly bonded roof assembly remain intact as one solid unit. The bond is immediately and completely destroyed in the wet assembly seen here in these core samples taken from a recent job site. Second, wet insulation has no thermal resistance, which results in reduced insulating properties and higher energy consumption. Third, the compression resistance and load-bearing capability of the insulation board deteriorate. The roof system often sinks slightly in these areas, allowing rainwater to be held and funneled through the original defect, accelerating the spread of the problem. Fourth, the insulation becomes much heavier as the open cells fill with water. Fifth, the water in the insulation is not potable water, but rather a very acidic brown tea of deteriorating binders and materials highly corrosive to metal. This leads to degradation and corrosion of metal components, even to the point of structural damage or failure. Sixth, the moisture attacks and degrades the roof itself from underneath, damaging it extensively and reducing its life cycle to a fraction of its original potential. Lastly, mold and mildew can result both inside the assembly and the facility itself. What is usually perceived as a sudden catastrophic roof failure, announcing itself as a massive leak into the building, is often the culmination of a process fueled by this very slow, insidious, cancer-like infiltration of water into the assembly, which gradually destroys the roof system. These cancers, like cancers in human bodies, can be detected and treated, interrupting this cycle. Early detection reduces not only cost, it reduces the disruption and risk of exposure of a larger roof project. Ironically, an outward symptom such as a leak into the building would be a blessing if it alerted the management to the problem in time. Too often, a leak inside the building means the roof saturation has reached disastrous levels. Disastrous proportions that could have been prevented by an ARID technician trained in infrared thermography. The technique utilizes the use of a sensitive infrared camera to locate heat retained in the heavier, denser wet insulation, contrasted by the surrounding dry insulation which cools much faster. Executed after sundown, the ARID technician scans the roof and uses a laser beam to direct an assistant to mark the outline of any warm, wet insulation board stock with marking paint. Often these areas take the shapes of rectangular boards as the moisture wicks from board to board within the assembly. Areas as small as a dinner plate are identifiable. Areas located with the camera are considered anomalies until they are spot verified by a second moisture detection device. Once the areas are located, confirmed, cataloged and plotted onto a drawing, an assessment is made how to most effectively interrupt the failure process and get the roof assembly back on track to a full, trouble-free life cycle. Owners that routinely scan their low-slope roofing assets experience lower overall roofing costs and reduced waste, much more accurate annual budgeting and decision-making, fewer disruptive projects, lower energy bills, fewer budget-altering surprises, the peace of mind that comes with knowing the true condition of these very expensive assets, treatment flexibility at the end of the roof's useful life cycle, reduced environmental impact in the form of wasted material and energy. From routine screenings to diagnosing chronic and mysterious leaks, ARID Corporation will efficiently and effectively help you keep your low-slope roof system in excellent health. ARID Corporation is dedicated to keeping a solid commercial roof over your head and preventing costly and disruptive premature roof failures through early detection and aggressive preventive maintenance.